The Life of Ryuichi Sakamoto. Those of you who are into music might know the name Ryuichi Sakamoto. This celebrated man from Japan earned a reputation for his different musical styles, not only at home, but across the world. Let's look at Sakamoto's career, which lasted almost half a century, from 1975 until his death in March 2023. From a young age, Sakamoto displayed a love of music, learning to play the piano at the tender age of 3. His musical influences ranged far and wide, drawing inspiration from artists such as Debussy and the Beatles. This mix likely allowed Sakamoto to look at different genres for his own work. In 1978, Sakamoto co-founded the Japanese band Yellow Magic Orchestra. Their special style featured a mix of electronic sounds. Yellow Magic Orchestra existed on and off until 2012. In a time filled with traditional melodies, Sakamoto and Yellow Magic Orchestra dared to experiment with their music. They played with electronic sounds to create pioneering techniques and new musical styles. This is something that Sakamoto would take with him into his solo career as well.
Hi everyone and welcome to English for You. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to talk about a famous musician, let's say. And he's done a lot of movie soundtracks.
That's right. He's composed scores or movie music. Also had a long career as a sort of pop musician as well with his group, the Yellow Magic Orchestra, and then doing his own solo stuff. This is a Japanese fellow by the name of Ryuichi Sakamoto.
Yeah.
And if you want to find out about a guy who had a long and very interesting career, you would definitely want to check out his work. I think I'm safe in saying that no matter what style of music you like, Ryuichi Sakamoto probably did something in that style at some time in his career, because he really did many different kinds or styles of music. So what do you say, Nikki? Should we get into the article and find out more?
Let's do it.
All right. So the article begins, those of you who are into music might know the name Ryuichi Sakamoto. My apologies for my Japanese pronunciation, but that is how we would pronounce his name in English. And you would know that if you are into music, if you're a music fan, if music is a passion or an interest in your life, that kind of thing. It says this celebrated man from Japan earned a reputation for his different musical styles, not only at home, but across the world. Yeah, world-famous guy, really. I'm not sure if he lived in Japan his whole life, but he would have played, sold-out concerts very easily in places like London or New York. He had a very good reputation, or as it says, he's a celebrated man. If you're celebrated, you're famous, you're honored, you have a lot of love and respect by people, and you obviously have a very good reputation.
Reputation 这边指的是名声，它是一个名词或者是知名度，指的也就是大众如何看待这个东西或是这个人。It's mostly based on past behavior or your character. 那你可以 earn a reputation， 就是获得盛名或者是一个名声。You have bad reputation, good reputation. For example, we have a restaurant and it serves good food, so probably it gets a good reputation.
It says, let's look at Sakamoto's career, which lasted almost half a century. 50 years, for those who know that a century is 100 years, so half a century, a 50-year career. That's very long, from 1975 until his death in March 2023. Wow, it's been almost a year since he died or since he passed away. And he was obviously working hard his whole life. That's why we talk about him having a 50-year or half a century career. Your career is basically your working life, the kind of things that you do after you finish school, after you finish your education. You go into a job, and many people kind of stick with the same kind of job for much of their life. You might study to be a lawyer or a doctor or a business person. That could be your career. You could have a career as a soldier in the army. You join the army, and then 40 years later, you're a general or a captain. You have a long career, a long life working at a particular job, or just working as a person who is who's a professional person and not just sort of studying as a student. That would be an educational career. But when we say career, we usually mean your life at work. For example, Marvin had a 40-year career in the Navy and retired last month.
那接着我们来看今天的主角 Sakamoto 的生涯。那 career 指的是生涯或是职业 a series of job, profession. You've been doing it for a period of time.
And his career may have been 50 years long, but he was playing music for even longer than that. From a young age, it says, Sakamoto displayed a love of music, learning to play the piano at the tender age of 3.
3.
Wow, that wasn't his career. Of course, at 3, he was a student. He was a young person. He wasn't even a student, actually, at 3.
As a baby.
He was a kid with a lot of musical talent. Exactly right. Then, of course, it became his career later on. But yes, he was really just naturally gifted at music, learning to play the piano at the tender age of 3. Here, tender it's an interesting way of using it. Often when we think of tender, we think of the quality of a meat that you might be eating or food you might be eating. Tender versus tough. If you overcook your meat, it will be hard to chew. That's tough. If you cook your meat perfectly, it's tender. It's easy to bite with your teeth. But we can also use tender to talk about an age, the tender age of, and it would be a certain younger age. I mean, you might say as a joke, my grandfather went skydiving for the first time at the tender age of 90. Well, that's not really a tender age. You're kind of using it as a joke there. But when we say the tender age of 3, that definitely is a very young age. For example, we could say Steve Jobs started Apple Computers at the tender age of 21, just 21 years old.
那坂本龙一从小就展露出他对音乐的热爱，才3岁他就开始练习弹钢琴。那这边看到的 tender age 指的是幼小的年纪。那 tender 这个形容词意思是年幼的或者是未成熟的，也就是 young, you don't have a lot of experience. 那也可以有其他的意思，像是 gentle and careful in a way that shows love. 所以 tender 可以是温柔的或者是关怀的。For example, he has a tender and soft voice.
All right, we mentioned his 50-year career as a professional musician. We also read next, his musical influences ranged far and wide, drawing inspiration from artists such as Debussy and the Beatles. I think I said he's done many different styles of music. His musical influences ranged far and wide. That kind of explains why he performed many styles. He liked many different kinds of music, or, as the article says, his influences ranged far and wide. Far and wide, it covered a lot of area. He had a very big musical appetite, I guess you could say. He liked music from all parts of the world, all styles of music. When we range things from far to wide, or we use range in this way, we're including a big variety of things, things that we've talked about, but also things like that. If you, for example, think of the Olympics, at the Olympics, the sports range from shooting to bicycling to, what else do they, wrestling. So all sorts of different types of sports, a big variety, a wide selection or choice. So when they range far and wide, that just means there's a lot of different influences, a lot of different things that he liked, from Debussy classical music to Beatles, of course, a classic rock and roll group, and everything in between those. For example, for the word range, we could say this European cafe serves food ranging from Italian pizza to French onion soup. All sorts of different different European food from many different countries.
那 range 这个动词呢，在这边指的是涉及涵盖 range from something to something 所提及的东西的范围。那从 A 到 B 的范围。For example, I teach a lot of students and the ages range from 13 to 18. 那它还有另外一个意思呢 range 也就是 a set of similar things 一类或者是一系列。那它意思我们有一个例句可以是 We have a range of food options 也就是说我们有很多不同类型的食物种类可以选择。那另外这边这个片语 far and wide 指的就是四面八方或者是广泛的各处。那我想对于一个音乐家最重要的东西就是灵感啦。那在这里我们看到坂本龙一的灵感来源是德布西还有披头士。Inspiration 这个名词指的是灵感 something that inspires you or someone that gives you ideas for doing something.
All right, back to our article. This mix, this wide range of musical styles, this mix likely allowed Sakamoto to look at different genres for his own work. Yeah, absolutely. He'd listened to many different styles of music as a kid, so this allowed him to look at different genres. A genre of music, a style of music, pretty much the same. And we think of jazz, classical, hip-hop, rock and roll, heavy metal. These are all different genres or styles of music. And it's quite likely that, growing up and listening to all these different genres would influence him and allow him, different choices or give him different ideas when he started to make his own music. It says in 1978, Sakamoto co-founded the Japanese band Yellow Magic Orchestra. That's kind of the first thing that kind of got his name out there, made him famous around the world. And that's a good example. Yellow Magic Orchestra made mostly music with electronic keyboards, but they also played rock and roll songs. I think their first album, they actually covered a Beatles song, but without using any guitars. It was a very interesting sound.
那在这边看到的片语 look at something 指的是考虑，那它考虑的不同的 genre 指的是电影、写作、艺术等等的类型或者是题材。那在这边我们也看到今天的文法 Let's take a look. 课文中的 likely 是副词，指的是有可能的，那通常会放在 be 动词或者是助动词之后，那并且在主要的动词之前。那 likely 和 probably 都有 50% 以上的几率，那另外一个 possibly 只要是超过 1%， 我们就可以用 possibly， 所以我们可以用 it is likely that 主词加一个动词，那 that 后面引导的就会是可能发生的事情。那 he didn't study at all, so it is likely that he will fail the test， 也就是说他没有念书，所以很有可能他不会过。
All right, let's get back to the article. Still talking about the Yellow Magic Orchestra, Ryuichi Sakamoto's first musical group, it says their special style featured a mix of electronic sounds. Yellow Magic Orchestra existed on and off until 2012. Yeah, so as we've mentioned, this was not a band that made their music using guitars and drums and those traditional instruments. They mainly used electronic sounds, a lot of keyboards and computers and stuff like that. When you're using electronic sounds, you're using musical instruments that make their sound using computers, using microchips, not by sort of strings vibrating the air. So electronic basically relates to computers, things that are digital, things that are powered by electricity, and have some kind of computer chip running them, acting as their brain. So things like keyboards, synthesizers, drum machines, and stuff like that when we're talking about music or electronic sounds. Here's an example. Kraftwerk from Germany was one of the first totally electronic music groups, and probably a bit of an influence for the Yellow Magic Orchestra guys, too.
Electronic 是形容词，指的是电子的或者是电子化的。那 electronic device 指的是电子设备。So when you take a plan, they'll ask you to turn off all your electronic devices. 那 electronic music 电子音乐呢，就是 produced by electronic equipment。那另外还有 electronic billing、electronic bill payment 指的就是电子账单。那同时我们还看到 on and off 这个片语，断断续续的，指的就是 it's for short periods of time but not regularly. For example, they've been together on and off. We don't really know what their relationship status is.
Okay. And our article next says, in a time filled with traditional melodies, Sakamoto and Yellow Magic Orchestra dared to experiment with their music. All right, so they're always looking to make sounds that other people haven't heard before, other groups haven't made before. Often when you listen to their music, especially back at that time, it would have sounded like music from the future or something, or maybe from a science fiction film. They were doing things that were very untraditional, not the kind of common music, common rock and roll or pop music you would have heard on the radio at that time. No, they wanted to be different. They dared to experiment. To dare to do something is to be brave enough to take a chance, to do something that could fail or it could succeed, but you really don't know, and there's a good chance that it might fail. So if we're thinking of, doing stunts, doing dangerous sports like, jumping out of an airplane or hang gliding or things like that, You'd have to dare to do something like that because it might not be safe and you could, in fact, hurt yourself or worse. So you need to be brave to dare to do something. Here's Natalie. Natalie doesn't dare lie to her parents. Well, you do need to be brave to dare. Sometimes you also need to be silly or stupid to dare. It's probably just a good idea not to lie to your parents. And we also had the word experiment. They dared to experiment with their music, with their unusual electronic sounds. To experiment is to try or test something out. You're often doing it in a very planned out kind of way, the way scientists will experiment. They'll have an idea that they want to test out. They'll set up a test or an experiment. We can also use it as a noun. And then they'll record all of the information, all of the data that comes out of their test. They'll study it, they'll learn from it, and then they can experiment again and get better and better results. So you're testing things in a very careful step-by-step kind of way. The chef experimented with using different types of coffee in her food. She didn't just make food and just say, yeah, I'll just throw in this much coffee. I don't know. It doesn't matter. No, she did it in a very planned out way, probably used coffee from different parts of the world to see what the tastes were, and, recorded all of the discoveries or the things that she learned.
那坂本龙一跟他乐团厉害的地方，就是他把电子的元素加入了他的音乐里。Dare 这个动词指的是敢，或者是敢于去做某件事情。It's something risky, something that you're afraid to do. 那我们常常会说 How dare you? 你怎么敢？或者是 Don't you dare? 你不准哦，这样子。那另外我们看到一个动词是 experiment， 指的是试验或者是尝试。To try different methods or ideas to find out if something works. 那它也可以是名词，指的是实验或是试用。
All right, next it says, they played with electronic sounds to create pioneering techniques and new musical styles. In other words, they dared to experiment and they dared to be different.
那这样做音乐的方式呢，是为了要创造开创性的音乐技巧以及新的音乐风格。Pioneering 是形容词，指的是开创性的。If something is pioneering, it is new and probably is introduced for the very first time. For example, the works that scientists do, they're very pioneering.
And then it says this is something that Sakamoto would take with him into his solo career as well. Even later on, when he wasn't working with the Yellow Magic Orchestra people, he was still daring to try new things. He was experimenting with new electronic sounds, always trying to find something new from which to make music.
Solo 是形容词，指的是单独的或是独自的，那通常和音乐相关。So a piece of music or for one performer 只有一个人表演的时候。那我们同时看到 duet 指的是二重唱、二重奏，那 trio 就会是三个人一起做的音乐。
All right, on the topic of music, Nikki, here's our chat question. Who is your favorite musician and why do you like them?
My favorite would be Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer is your favorite musician.
Yeah, because for Lion King, for Interstellar, Inceptions, I really like those kind of music. That's
Okay, so you like listening to movie scores.
Yeah, exactly.
In your free time. Very, very interesting. All right, what about you guys? I'm sure you all have favorite musicians. Have a chat about that. Then we'll be back tomorrow with more from the life of Ryuichi Sakamoto. We'll see you then. Vocabulary Review. Career. Jack started his teaching career at a small school in Sanxia. Now he's a principal in Taipei. Tender. Kevin's love for reading began at the tender age of 4. Now he's ahead of his classmates. Range. We have many TVs for sale in our store, ranging from small, cheaper ones to huge, expensive ones. Electronic. At the concert, the band surprised us by playing electronic music, which was different from their usual style. Dare. None of the kids dared to go into the old house at midnight. They were too scared. Experiment. The cook is experimenting with new dishes by combining Asian and European foods.
智慧小补帖
Reputation. Inspiration. Genre. Pioneering. Solo.